Sean's second question is, do you have any advice for starting a podcast? How did you gain momentum so fast and get interviews with such incredible guests? All right. The advice that comes to mind is record at least 10 episodes and don't release them at the beginning. Just interview your friends and family because you want to make sure that your setup is good. You have your preparation down. Maybe I don't know what sort of podcast you have in mind. Maybe it's a solo podcast, but I'm sure anyways, you just want to do at least 10 episodes and not release them, or at least not be committed to releasing them, just so you can get the feel for the software, having the camera on you. Because even right now, 200 something episodes in, I am very, very frazzled with having the camera on me. Then I also suggest over preparing at the beginning. And again, it's difficult without knowing what kind of podcast you have in mind. But I over prepared the beginning of the podcast just so that I knew that I would always have something to say or something to fall back on. And then when you become more comfortable, you don't need to do as more preparation. You should probably, I don't know, maybe you are very famous, Sean, but if you are not, you probably, I don't know about probably, but it's very likely that you won't get any viewers for a very long time. So that is also something that you need to be steeled for going into it. Then as far as gaining momentum goes, I don't know if I got momentum quickly. I think it probably took about 9 months before I had 1,000 subscribers or so. But for me, having an interview-based podcast, gaining momentum came from getting guests that people want to hear from. So when the podcast was me interviewing my uncle about ice cream, there were not many listeners. And even when I was interviewing very famous philosophers, academic philosophy doesn't have a huge audience. Not that there aren't some popular academic philosophy shows, but other guests like, I mean, Chomsky didn't. This is something that got under my skin and made me sad. Is that there was another podcast that had an interview with Chomsky like the same week or so that I did, and my video got 3,000 views, and this other person's got close to 1 million, and it was also a small channel. So a lot of it is randomness. And then as far as getting interviews with incredible guests goes, this really just comes down to, one, being aware of which guests you might have access to. So there are plenty of guests that I would love to have on the show that I just still can't get. But some people, like, I probably could have had, I don't know, Noam Chomsky on a lot sooner because he was at the time very willing to do interviews with people. So one, I guess it's having an idea of who is doing podcasts, and that comes from looking at YouTube or listening to podcasts. Another thing is I send very genuine invitations that I think are also kind and possibly intriguing. And then as your podcast grows, you might want to consider including links to past episodes, particularly to episodes with guests you think the people you are inviting will be familiar with. That's probably those are the main things.